What's going on, guys? It's New York Prepper here. In this video, I'm going to do a comparison between the 44 Magnum and the 500 Magnum. So, a lot of you guys may know that the 44 Magnum used to have the title of the world's most powerful handgun, and that was true in the 1950s until the 454 Casull came out and was invented by Dick Casull, which eclipsed the 44 Magnum. But if you guys have ever watched Dirty Harry, in the Dirty Harry movies, Clint Eastwood talks about the 44 Magnum and mentions it being the most powerful handgun in the world. And it's very true that the 44 Magnum was the most powerful handgun cartridge in the world for a long time. And even after the 454 Casull was invented shortly after the 44 Magnum, the 454 Casull never had the same level of popularity as the 44 Magnum. The 454 Casull was seen as a exotic cartridge by a lot of people, and it just didn't achieve the same amount of popularity that the 44 Magnum did for a variety of reasons. So although the 454 Casull, shortly after the 44 Magnum was released in the mid-1950s, and it was invented by Elmer Keith, who was an absolute genius when it came to big bore revolvers, but the 454 eclipsed the 44 shortly after, and Dick Casull invented the 454 in the late 1950s. However, the 44 was just the most popular for a long time, so the 44 Magnum had the crown of being the most powerful handgun cartridge in the world for a very long time, up until the 90s even. And the 44 Magnum is no doubt a very powerful cartridge. It's been used successfully to hunt large game, and it's been used successfully to defend against bear attacks. And the 44 Magnum has actually stopped more brown bear attacks and more bear attacks than any other pistol cartridge in the world, okay? So that's pretty, that's a pretty serious reputation. Even though the 44 Magnum is not as powerful as a lot of other cartridges now, including the 500 Magnum, which I'm going to get into in a second, the 44 Magnum still has a very respectable reputation, and it has been used quite a lot to defend against large predatory animals like bears. So there's no question about its power. Now, moving on to the 500 Magnum, the 500 Magnum was invented in the early 2000s, and it was released at SHOT Show in 2003, and it was a joint development between Corbin and Smith & Wesson, and they wanted to develop a 50 caliber big bore revolver cartridge, and they came up with the X-frame and the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum, okay? So the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is now the most powerful production handgun cartridge in the world. It has nearly triple the power of a 44 Magnum, all right? So the first thing you'll notice when you look at these two cartridges is you can see how much bigger the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is. And the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum cartridge has an overall length of 2.2 inches, although that length is oftentimes exceeded if you use longer bullets and heavier bullets. But most importantly, the case length of the 500 Smith & Wesson is 1.62 inches, and the 44 Magnum has a case length of 1.1 inches. Okay, so the case is almost a half inch longer than the 44 Magnum. All right. On top of that, the case capacity of the 500 Magnum is a lot more, just because of the diameter of the bullet. Okay, and the case diameter is just much larger. So the 500 Magnum can hold a lot more powder than the 44 Magnum, and thus it can easily generate very high levels of muzzle energy and velocity, versus the 44 Magnum. It has a much smaller capacity, and it's a lot harder to achieve high velocities with heavy bullets because the case capacity is a lot smaller than the 500 Magnum, okay? So the 500 Magnum has the advantage of power. Comparing the size, another thing I want to show you is the case, okay? You can really see the size difference when you look at the case. This is an empty shell casing from a 500 Magnum cartridge that I shot. And you can just see how big the 500 Magnum is compared to the 44 Magnum. All right, look at how much bigger the case is. Okay, the case, I mean, if you were to just take away the 500 cartridge and we just look at the case of the 500 compared to the 44, it just really dwarfs the 44, okay? And I can actually take this case here and literally it'll swallow the whole 44 Magnum loaded cartridge, okay? That's how big it is. I mean, it's just absolutely monstrous. The case is here, okay? Look at how big this case is here. All right, it's a 50 caliber bullet. The 500 Magnum uses a 50 caliber bullet, and the 44 Magnum uses a .429 inch bullet, okay? So it's a 40 caliber bullet. The 44 Magnum is not 0.44 inches like a lot of people think. It's actually 0.429 inches, okay? But it's a 40 caliber bullet versus a 50 caliber bullet. And so it's an absolutely monstrous cartridge, the 500 Magnum. And it generates a lot of energy, a lot of power. Now the 44 Magnum with plus P loads can generate up to 1,500 foot-pounds of energy, which is nothing to sneeze at. However, the 500 Magnum can generate up to 3,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Okay, that is absolutely massive for a handgun. Okay, you're talking about the same levels of energy as a 12-gauge shotgun slug or a 30-06 or even a 45-70. Okay, the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is approaching a hot-loaded 45-70 or a hot-loaded 30-06 in terms of energy. It actually surpasses a 30-06 in terms of muzzle energy. A 30-06 will top out at around 2,800 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, and the 500 Magnum will top out at 3,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, depending on what loads you use, okay? Obviously, if you use those super hot loads that generate 3,000 foot-pounds, it's going to definitely have massive recoil, and it's going to wear out the chamber a lot faster, especially if you do a lot of rapid fire, which I don't suggest, nor would you ever need to do rapid fire with a 500 Magnum. So we're looking at double to triple the amount of energy with a 500 Magnum, okay? These particular loads that you're looking at, on the left, you have the 44 Magnum. This one has a 305 grain hard cast bullet traveling at 1,300 feet per second and generating about 1,200 foot-pounds of energy. This one here on the right is the 500 Magnum, and that's a 440 grain hard cast bullet, and that one's traveling at 1,600 feet per second and generating 2,600 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. All right, these are both bear loads. This is a 44 Magnum bear load and a 500 Magnum bear load, and I've done a lot of penetration testing and velocity testing with these loads, and this 44 Magnum bear load can penetrate 4 2x10 Douglas fir framing joists, and the 440 grain 500 Magnum hardcast can penetrate 9 2x10s. So it has nearly or more than double the penetration of the 44 Magnum. All right. On top of that, it penetrates twice as deep, but it also has a huge diameter. Okay, look at the difference in the me-plats on these bullets here. Okay, on the right side you have the 500 Magnum, and on the left side you have the 44 Magnum. Okay, and I'm trying to just set this up so you guys can really see the difference here. Okay, look at the difference in size between the noses of the bullets here. All right, look at how massive the 500 Magnum me-plat is. The me-plat is that flat part of the nose. Okay, just look at how big that is and the diameter difference between the 40 caliber 44 Magnum and the 50 caliber 500 Magnum. All right, I mean, it's just a massive difference in terms of the hole that they create, and as a result, the 500 Magnum will create a larger wound channel and will damage tissue faster and do more damage. It will stop a dangerous animal faster than the 44 Magnum will, provided you can place your shot properly. It will create a larger wound channel because the diameter is bigger, and you can use heavier grain bullets, which means that you have a higher sectional density, which means that the bullet will stay straight when it penetrates through something. All right, so the 500 Magnum, in my opinion, is superior in all ways to the 44 Magnum, except when it comes to recoil, cost, and portability. Okay, the only negatives of the 500 Magnum is that it's very expensive to shoot. A box of 20 is going to cost you around $50 to $75, okay, depending on if you go premium or factory loads. Hand loading will reduce the cost by about 50%. You're still going to be looking at about $1 a bullet, and then you're going to be looking at around 50 cents a case. And powder and primers are a pretty decent price, you know, but even if you're hand loading, you're still going to be looking at up to $2 a round to load these bad boys, okay? So, and factory loaded, you're going to be looking at $50 to $75 a box of 20. So the cost of a 500 Magnum is the same as a Magnum rifle, okay? My 500 Magnum ammo costs the same as my 300 Win Mag ammo, okay? So, you know, you're going to have to be ready to spend a lot of money if you're willing to actually practice and get good with it, especially if you're concerned with bear defense, okay? The 44 Magnum, on the other hand, is extremely affordable, and you can get these bear loads, for instance, just, you know, comparing the cost, these 44 Magnum bear loads here from Underwood, the 305 grain hard casts, these cost, for a box of 20, cost $20. So this is $1 a round, okay? These Buffalo Bore 440 grain bear loads cost over $3 a round, okay? So a box of 20 of these Buffalo Bores is $75. A box of 20 of the 44 Magnums is $20. So you're looking at almost 4 times the cost with the 500 Magnum versus the 44 Magnum in some cases, all right? So that's something to consider. You know, that's definitely a big thing to consider is cost, okay? Especially if you're using this gun for defensive purposes, you're going to need to spend time practicing to get proficient enough to use your pistol in a real defense situation, a real defensive situation. So that's something to consider. The recoil is another thing. Now, depending on the size of the pistol you get, the recoil will be different, okay? If you have a short barrel pistol, it's going to have more recoil than a long barrel pistol, all right? However, no matter what the configuration is, the 500 Magnum is going to have strong recoil, okay? Even if you go with a longer barrel, you're still going to feel the recoil in your hand. For some people, that's a deal breaker. Some people develop a really bad flinch. You know, me personally, I don't develop a flinch, but what happens is if I don't wear gloves when I shoot these really powerful bear loads, if I shoot more than a couple of rounds, I start developing a blood blister on my trigger finger. So what I do now is I wear gloves every time I shoot my 500 Magnum. All right, it sounds kind of, you know, sounds kind of girly, a girly thing to do, but you know, why should I develop a blood blister unnecessarily if I can just put a simple glove on and it'll prevent that friction? And the friction is generated from the recoil, okay? The 44 Magnum bear load will also, this load right here I've shot, and out of my snub nose 44, it generates a massive amount of recoil, okay? So both of these generate a lot of recoil, but the 500 Magnum will definitely have a lot more recoil. And again, that's a deal breaker for a lot of people. Another thing too is the portability, okay? A 500 Magnum is, number one, it's going to be a larger pistol, and I'll show you guys in a second. I'm going to compare my 44 Magnum pistol to my 500 Magnum pistol, and I'll show you guys the size difference between the cylinder and the frame, okay? And that's something you need to consider depending on where you're going to be using this, how you're going to be using these pistols, and you know, your physical conditioning, because a 500 Magnum is, you're not going to be able to find one that weighs less than 3.5 pounds, and you probably don't want a 500 Magnum that weighs less than 3.5 pounds. All right, my 6.5-inch barrel 500 Magnum weighs just under 4 pounds. And I really wouldn't want to go lighter than that, because the recoil, you know, even with my 6.5-inch barrel, it's pretty severe. And, you know, the 44 Magnum, on the other hand, you can get yourself a 2 to 3 pound 44 Magnum that's going to be very compact, very easy to carry. It's not going to be too bulky and take up a lot of room, versus the 500 Magnum, depending on which one you get. It's a massive frame, it's a massive cylinder, it's heavy, it's bulky, okay? You're not going to be able to conceal it. You're going to need a special holster for it, okay? I wear mine on a chest holster. That's the most comfortable configuration I've found. I've tried hip holsters, I've tried shoulder holsters, and the chest holster is really the best way you can carry a 500 Magnum, in my opinion, especially if you want to use it for defensive purposes and get a pretty quick draw. So the 44 Magnum is going to be easier to carry. There's more holster configurations for the 44 Magnum because it's not as massive. So you can wear it as a shoulder holster. You can wear it as a hip holster. You could wear it with a inside the waistband holster even, okay? And you could even double your 44 Magnum pistol for urban carry, okay? I actually do that. I take my 44 Magnum, my Smith & Wesson Model 629, my snub nose, and I actually carry it for urban situations as well, and I use 44 specials in that case, okay? The 44 specials have the same amount of recoil as a 45 ACP about, you know, and similar power, okay? So the advantage of the 44 is that you could double it for urban carry. All right, a 500 Magnum, you're not going to be able to urban carry that, and you're not going to want to, because the penetration and power is going to be so extreme that you're going to risk collateral damage, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. So, you know, you're gonna hit the bad guy, but you're gonna hit maybe 10 other people behind the bad guy, and it's gonna keep going. Okay, you have to think of the 500 Magnum as a rifle round, all right, because the 500 Magnum is pretty much a rifle round in terms of the power. Okay, it's at the point where it has the same power level as Magnum rifles. Okay, and I'm gonna get into that in a second. So those are the main drawbacks of the 500 Magnum: is the cost, the portability, and how easy it is to carry, the weight, and then also the recoil. All right, the ballistics, the terminal ballistics, the velocity, the energy, the 500 Magnum is a clear winner there. Okay, if you're going after big game, or you live in an area with large predatory bears, the 500 Magnum has no equal in terms of pistol rounds. Okay, it's the king as far as being a bear stopper. Nothing is better than a 500 Magnum as far as stopping large bears. Okay, the 50 caliber bullet and the massive energy and the heavy bullets that you can use, it just absolutely hammers large brown bears. Okay, so if you're somebody that's looking to hunt large game or protect yourself from large predators, 500 Magnum has no equal. However, the 44 Magnum can do the job, but it's not going to do it as good as the 500 Magnum. All right. The advantage that the 44 Magnum has is that it's obviously cheaper and it's more versatile because you can use it in urban situations and for home defense. All right. It doesn't over-penetrate as badly as the 500 Magnum. Now, if we're comparing some stats here between the 44 and the 500, the 44 Magnum has a maximum SAMI pressure of 36,000 psi. Okay, that's the maximum pressure that SAMI recommends for as far as chamber pressure for the 44 Magnum. The Smith & Wesson 500 has a maximum chamber pressure recommendation of 60,000 psi. Okay, so it has nearly double the maximum allowable chamber pressure rating by SAMI. Okay, 60,000 psi for the 500 Magnum, 36,000 psi for the 44 Magnum. And if we're talking about real world loadings, the 44 Magnum, typically the chamber pressures are around 33,000 to 35,000 for a hot load. Okay, and most Smith & Wesson 500 Magnums, they usually don't advise going above 55,000 psi. However, you could theoretically go up to 60,000 based on the SAMI specs. Okay, and the Smith & Wesson X-frame revolver, which I'll show you guys in a second, is rated to 63,000 psi. All right, so it's an absolutely monstrously powerful or monstrously strong cylinder and monstrously strong frame. Okay, so the 500 Smith & Wesson generates the same pressure as a 7mm Magnum, 300 Winchester Magnum, and even a lighter loaded 338 Lapua Magnum. Okay, that's how powerful this cartridge is. Okay, and it also uses a large rifle primer. Okay, versus the 44 Magnum, it uses a large pistol primer. Now, you can also use a large rifle Magnum primer, which is the same primer that you use if you're loading 300 Winchester Magnum or 7mm Remington Magnum or 338 Lapua Magnum. Any of the Magnum rifle cartridges, you can use the same primer in the 500 Magnum as a Magnum rifle. Okay, so that's pretty interesting, and a lot of guys do that, especially if they use their 500 Magnum in colder conditions. They want solid ignition, they use a Magnum rifle primer. So that just tells you the huge difference between these two. Okay, for all intents and purposes, a 500 Magnum is pretty much a rifle cartridge in my opinion, because it uses a large rifle primer or a Magnum rifle primer versus the 44 Magnum uses a pistol primer. So, I personally consider it a rifle round. Okay, and it pretty much generates the same power as a 50 Beowulf. Okay, it has the same energy. It actually is more powerful than a 50 Beowulf, and again, the pressure that it creates is the same as a Magnum rifle. 60,000 psi is massive amount of pressure. Okay, so this is just a totally insanely powerful cartridge, so I thought it would be fun to compare these two together and discuss the pros and cons. Again, the 500 Magnum will almost penetrate double what the 44 Magnum will, But the 44 Magnum, again, you know, it's very effective. It's been used a lot on bears and big game, so I'm not trying to make it seem like the 44 Magnum is anemic by any means, but if you're dealing with large predatory animals, the 500 Magnum is your go-to choice. The 44 Magnum will do the job, but it'll just do the job a little bit less efficiently than the 500 will. You know, for brown bears, if you're dealing, I think the 44 Magnum, for me personally, I don't carry a 44 Magnum if I anticipate running into brown bears, because I feel that a 44 Magnum is barely enough to stop a brown bear. Now, unless you get a headshot on it, but you know, the chances of getting a headshot on a charging brown bear are very low. So you have to anticipate the possibility of you know, missing a headshot and having to hit the shoulder or the body. And if you hit the shoulder or the body, the 44 Magnum may not do as much damage, you know, as it should. And so the 500 Magnum is more of a sure, more guaranteed to stop a brown bear. Okay, even if you miss it in the head and you hit the shoulder, you hit the body, no matter where you hit the bear, he's gonna feel it. Okay, and it's gonna do damage. All right. The 44 Magnum, not so much. All right, it'll do damage, but it's not going to do the same amount of damage and the same penetration that the 500 will. All right, so when I go to brown bear country, and I'll upload some videos of me in Montana carrying this pistol, I carry the 500 Magnum just because I don't want to take the chance in case I do hit the bear in the body. I just want to have something that's extremely powerful that's going to stop it no matter what. No matter where I hit it, it's going to do massive damage. So, all right, guys, so I'm stand by and I'm going to show you guys the two different pistols that you can shoot, the 44 Magnum and the 500 Magnum, and I'm going to compare the size differences and show you guys the difference in size and stuff like that. So stay tuned. All right, guys, so I have my two pistols here. Here is the 500 Smith & Wesson. This is the X frame, just so you guys know it's not loaded. Okay, here's the 44 Magnum. This is the N frame. Okay, this is the Performance Center Model 629. It has a 2.625 inch barrel. Also not loaded, all right? Because I know there's a lot of people that are real anal about that on the internet. So I want to just compare the size of the frames so you guys can see how much more massive the X frame is compared to the N frame, all right? Now, if you look at the frames here, you can see how much larger the X frame is, all right? When I'm saying the frame, I'm talking about this section right here around the cylinder, okay? If you look at that section, you compare the frames, you could see how much more massive the frame is, okay? And the N frame is not a small frame, and I actually have big hands, so this 44 Magnum looks small in my hands. You know, I'm a large guy, so, but if, you know, this is a big pistol, all right? This thing is big. You know, it looks big when you put it next to a Glock or something. And the X frame, you know, the 500, I mean, it just makes this 44 Magnum look tiny. You know, it makes it look like a, you know, like a 38 Special or a 22 or something like that. But this is actually a really large pistol, all right? So, you know, physical comparisons, you can see the size difference, okay? Now, if we look at the cylinders, here's where the big differences are, all right? If we look at the cylinder, okay, on this 500, you could see, number one, it's a five round cylinder, and the 44 Magnum is a 6-round cylinder. Okay, I'm going to see if I can show you guys. All right, so you can see how much larger the 44 Magnum cylinder is, just so much smaller than the 500 Magnum cylinder. All right, let me see if I can compare them together here. All right, I probably should have just taken the cylinder off. It would have been easier to show, but kind of crunched for time. So, you know, you could see the size of the cylinders. I mean, it's just a massive size difference here. Okay, look at how much larger the 500 Magnum cylinder is, the diameter of the cylinder. But what's more important is the metal between each cylinder, or between each chamber, I'm sorry. If you look at the thickness of the metal between each chamber, all right, you could see on the 500 how much metal is in between each chamber. You know, you're looking at 1/4 inch of steel between each chamber. Look at how thick the metal is here, okay? The steel, the stainless steel. And the reason why is obviously the chamber pressures are a lot higher, like I mentioned, okay? The 500 Magnum generates the same amount of chamber pressure as a Magnum rifle, okay? So it has to have a lot of steel in between the chambers so it doesn't blow apart, okay? Another thing too is the top straps. If you compare the top straps, which is this piece of metal right here, all right, look at the difference in the top strap thickness, okay? You could see the top strap of the 500 is pretty much double the thickness, okay? I'm trying to hold the cylinder open here. Look at how much thicker the top strap is, okay? I mean, come on. It's literally double the thickness here, okay? Obviously, the length is huge difference in length, okay? Look at how much longer the cylinder is, which is nice because it allows you to use heavy bullets, and you can seat those bullets out so you get more powder space, okay? And you can't do that with the 44 Magnum because it's limited by the length of the cylinder, okay? Versus the 500 Magnum, you can use 700 grain bullets, or you can use solid copper 400 grain bullets that are over 1.25 inches long, or even 1.5 inches long, and you can seat those bullets out to maximize the powder space so you're not compressing powder, okay? So, I mean, it's just a massive difference. Look at those top straps, okay? Look at the top strap here on the 500, and then look at the top strap on the 44 Magnum. I mean, it's a big difference, okay? So I wanted to just show you guys that, and again, look at these cylinders and look at how much less metal is in between each chamber on the 44 Magnum. Okay, it's a big difference here, okay? All right, just look at how much less steel is in between each chamber here, okay? You're probably looking at about 1/8 inch, all right, in between each chamber. And then if we look at the 500, you know, you're looking at almost 1/4 inch. So it's a big difference, you know, but I wanted to just kind of show you guys that. And obviously I've done a lot of penetration tests with both of these pistols. And if you want to see more of those videos on my 500 Magnum, all the penetration tests I've done, check my 500 Magnum playlist, and I posted a lot of my penetration tests over there. So, and I'll attach a link up above so you can see that and quickly access that. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. And don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.